Hi, I am Howard of Sigma Integral. We are a motion systems builder. We're located in Pomona, California, and we've recently just introduced a new motion system to the market. It's called the DK2. It's a 4-actuator motion system for your sim racing chassis. It retails for $4,900. Yeah, check it out. It's pretty cool. It's designed and manufactured completely right here in California. So yeah, take a look. But us being a motion builder, it may appear as if we're feeling a bit butthurt after watching Neil's video. Maybe, but no, I'm doing this video because Niels is a smart guy. Right? He's been around for a long time. He's really smart. As a matter of fact, we've been his customers for a long time, for a few years ago. So yeah, we used some of his the controllers, but the switch controllers for many years in some of our most heavy-duty applications with a lot of success. So yeah, Niels is a smart guy. He's smarter than I am, I'm sure. Now, I do. So the topic of discussion today is, given everything that Niels had presented in his video, how do we make a good motion system at a consumer level, right? So to start, I like to kind of start with some of the basic principles first, and I apologize if you already know most of the stuff, if not all, but I'll do what I can to fly through it. So let's talk about the 6 degrees of freedom first. There's 6 of them. The first 3 have to do with rotational, the rotation of an object or vehicle. It's the Mazda RX-7. And the next 3 have to do with linear motion of the vehicle or object. So the first degree of freedom, as I'm sure you know, is the pitch. This is roll when you're turning, and then this is yaw. Okay. And the next 3 degrees of freedom are linear motions, so x-axis, y-axis, and heave. Now in sim racing, we call this sway, surge, and heave. Okay. Now in and Niels also pointed this out. In the real world, it's not just pitch and that's it, right? It's a combination of different degrees of freedom. So you have pitch. It may be right at the center where the number 7 is, or it could be. I mean, that's also pitch, right? About the back, and that's also pitch about the front, right? And I mean, yaw, for example, it could be like this, or it could be like that. That's also yaw. But there are combinations of other movements. Okay, so with that said, as you can imagine, it's pretty complicated in the real world. Now, in addition to the degrees of freedom, each one of them have a lot of motion associated with them. Okay, so for each one of the degrees of freedom, there are, at least to my knowledge, 7 orders of motion. So at the very base level, and I'm going to put it right here on the chart. So at the very basic level, there's position, right? So this vehicle, in the top view, could be here, could be here, could be here, could be in any position. And that's all you know, just the distance between each point and where they are, without too much context. Now, if you take position, the change in position, with respect to time, that's a fancy way of saying speed, velocity, right? So if you take the distance from point A to point B, and you divide that by the time it took for this to travel from A to B, then you get velocity, average velocity, or speed. Now, if you take the speed that you travel at in real life from A to B is probably not consistent, right? It might be like 50 kilometers per hour, 51, 52, 53, 54, and then slow down, whatever, right? So that's when acceleration is involved. So if you take the change in speed over time, you get acceleration. However, even for acceleration, it's not constant all the time. If you have constant acceleration, you might have a gradual increase in speed, where you constantly feel that you're being pushed into your seat all the way through A to B, or you might feel like in a drag racing scenario where you get an immense amount of G-force initially, and then it kind of just tapers off as you go. The speed is still increasing, but the acceleration isn't constant, right? So when you do the change in acceleration over time, you're looking at the next order called a jerk. So these are all derivatives of position, just fancy math terms, but just different orders of motion. And then after jerk, which is really useful in calculation as well, but after jerk you get snap, crackle, and pop, which is obviously inspired by the breakfast cereal. But these three levels are maybe like just for academia research type stuff. I don't know anything about it, and I'm not going to pretend that I do. So I'm going to stop right here. But the point is that motion is can be complex in the real world, because you have 6 degrees of freedom, 6 different ways to move this object or vehicle, and you can move them all in different ways with 7 derivatives of motion or position, right? So imagine that, and getting all mixed together. Sorry, I have to cough. All right, so let's do Neil's example next. So Neil's mentioned that for a motion rig, what happens is when the vehicle brakes, for example, it nosedives, and when this happens, the vehicle seat goes from this position to this position. So it smacks the body like so, and produces the opposite force or opposite experience of what you should experience in real life on the track. I don't believe that's entirely true, because in real life, what happens when you say go flat out on the straight and hot into brake one or hot into turn one and slam on a brake, is the first thing you notice, probably the only thing, one of the few things you'll only notice, is that this overwhelming, overpowering sensation of your body flying forward, obviously, right, against your body restraint, the seatbelt. But what's also happening is you step on the brake pedal really hard, the front brakes engage, the front suspension compresses, the rear suspension unloads, right, and it goes into a nosedive. Now if your head was right here, you would see exactly this, right? So the seat smacking against the body. So it isn't entirely true, actually it isn't true, that your motion rig is doing the opposite of what it should do, or giving you the opposite sensation. It's actually doing exactly what it should be doing in real life. It's just that overpowering sensation of you flying forward is completely gone. Now, I want to talk about what happens with our brain, at least my brain, right? What happens in a simulation is that, your brain is a super powerful computer that can compute in ways that we can't even understand or comprehend. It just does all these things in fractions of a second, nanoseconds or even less. Take somebody jumping off a platform, for example, and does 2 spins, 2 rolls in the air, and lands on his or her feet. Now that may be something really simple for someone to just perform, just get on and do it without even thinking about it or ever writing anything down. But imagine that we had to program a robot to do that. I mean, it's beyond my comprehension, right? It'd be really, really difficult to do. But our brain and could command our body and our extremities, our sensories, our limbs, and everything to do all that in fractions of a second with amazing accuracy, right? So when we sit in a sim rig in front of computer screens, there's no fooling the brain. It knows exactly what's happening. It knows that, hey, you're sitting in this sim rig in front of computer screens, and you can't exactly do this or this, right? So let's just throw this and these sensations out the window. And when I throw these degrees of freedoms out, I'm going to throw all the associated derivatives of position out the window with them as well. And I know this works for sure because I'm sure we all kind of grew up driving sim rigs that had probably nothing but a Logitech G27 or 25, or right, and that worked, right? Because it didn't have any of the degrees of freedom besides force feedback wheels and pedals, and it still worked. It was still an amazing driving experience. So our brains knows to take out what's not there and try to make sense out of it. Okay, so let's see what's left. We can't go this way or this way, right? And in a typical 4-post 4-actuator sim rig, which is what we specialize in, we still have the pitch, which is fantastic. We have roll, great. We have heave, that's excellent. That's exactly what it should be. There's no yaw, but you probably can't feel it unless you're drifting or something like that. So my brain knows to take the 3 degrees of freedom that are available to me and makes the best sense out of it. And our recipe here is to simply take all the degrees of freedoms that we can't do well or are not practical to even try, and just throw them out, just ignore them. And we only focus on the ones that we know we can do well. In fact, we can do so well that we can replicate or duplicate exactly what's happening. And the result of that is just amazing experience. It's very exhilarating. It's I mean, the proof for that is to just try yourself. Get into see if you can get your hands on a 4-post 4-actuator sim rig and give it a go. It doesn't have to be ours, as long as it's sort of in essence what we do. Like, the trick or our recipe is to just have actuators that are short in stroke, that are fast and responsive, and that are nearly latency free as much as possible. And it really maps out the motion and the terrain and the rumble strips and the road texture. It really brings it to life as much as possible, one-to-one if possible. And yeah, that's what we do here, and it feels amazing. It really does. And now, before I go, I just want to say this is not. It's not really like, I'm not trying to knock on like hexapods or other motion systems that are more complex, because we know that there are these super complex simulation systems that are used for automotive R&D, academia or aviation, and they're obviously legitimate, right? That's what they're built to do. But the hexapods that I've personally been in are the ones that are like for marketing purposes, I guess. They're like at trade shows or like exhibitions or something like that, and they usually like go nuts, right? Like a lot of motion, very exaggerated, and they make me feel very sick, because that's when my brain gets really confused. It tries to tell my brain that there's surge and there's sway, and all the 6 degrees of freedoms are there, but they're not really. Like, some of them they do well, some they just completely fail in, right? So and because there's so much motion, the response and the latency, it's all kind of like just crammed together into like a big um, yeah. It's just there's just too much happening. I think the idea is that, like, for motion queuing at least, is that let's just give the surge that the driver is looking for, right? By doing this, and then we'll slowly bring the rig back, so the brain doesn't know that we're moving back, so it's ready for the next one again. But of course your brain knows, right? It doesn't make any sense because there's no sustained G. So it's either that the acceleration or surge or sway stops prematurely, or it starts to roll back when it shouldn't, and plus all these 6 degrees of freedom and different derivatives of position all mixed together. Is just that's when my brain gets really confused, and that's when I get nausea and I feel sick. So anyhow, that's it. I'm gonna wrap up here. Just give it a try. Um, for road racing, this is the way to do it. Keep it short, keep it fast, keep it responsive. All right. Well, that's it. Good luck. Thanks.